Hello, viewers. Welcome. I am Tess Van Thielen, the Vice President of Advanced Services for Rogers for Business, and thank you for joining us today. In today's session, we want to share how asset monitoring solutions can help bring transparency to your supply chains. I'm very excited to be joined today by Nigel Wallace. Nigel is IDC Canada's Research VP for Internet of Things and Industry of Research. And as many of you know, IDC is a global provider of technology market intelligence and advisory services. Welcome, Nigel.
Thanks.
I'm also pleased to welcome Edwin Winder, is a seasoned technology executive with a proven track record of success in sales and business development with early stage, growth, and mature companies. As VP of Americas, Ed is responsible for the growth and expansion of Romy's business in the United States, Canada, and Latin America. And Rogers is excited to partner with Romy to provide asset management solutions to Canadian businesses. Welcome, Edwin.
Pleasure.
So, Nigel, what have you noticed in terms of trends and what is driving this change?
Well, it's been a year. As the slide shows, right? Supply chains everywhere just went sideways, pun fully intended. Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal. And at one point, that one single mistake from the pilot blocked 422 other ships from navigating the canal. That ended up having a whiplash effect on ports, on manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, and all the transportation networks that bind them together. I don't think we all realize that global supply chains were held together by such a vulnerable thread. And obviously last year was a lot more than a single ship, right? The impact of COVID-19 rippled through manufacturing as different regions were hit by all sorts of public health restrictions, but in an asynchronous manner. And that affected transportation, ports, railways, trucking, 3PL, wholesale, and retail. Each region, each country was affected differently. Different policies affected them, different restrictions on their mobility affected them. And that meant that each player in the system was adjusting at a different rate, so the whole network started to become out of sync. And what happens when they become out of sync is you start to see this. You start to see this mismatch between loading and unloading. So for instance, this is the port of Long Beach, just outside Los Angeles in the States. And it's got more ships sitting at anchor doing nothing because they cannot get their cargo unloaded. There are tens of thousands of containers now sitting in the Pacific Ocean, not going anywhere. And those containers aren't just containers. Those containers are actually your supplies. Those containers are your products. They're the things that you want your kids to buy or buy for your kids, really. So that means there's a ripple effect further downstream. And not just the ripple effect of like, where's my stuff, but the cost of getting your stuff from one place to another has just been massively inflationary. So if you look at the chart here, you can see the average cost here has gone up by what is that, like 3 times or more, depending on which ports you're trying to go to for a transoceanic voyage. And that impacts your margins, right? The cost of being able to get the product to market is part of the cost of the goods sold. And when it suddenly triples, well, who pays for that? Right? Do you eat the cost and your margins go down? Does your customer eat it? Or worse, what's happening to a lot of Canadian customers, especially manufacturers, is if you can't get space on the container, you can't make your product. So if your product has 100 parts and you have 99 of them in your warehouse and you can assemble them, but you're missing that one crucial part, you don't have a product to sell. And so manufacturers, Umbra, for instance, which makes furniture here, they're cutting the number of SKUs they have in production. They can't sell them all because they can't get parts. So they're trying to just select the products they have that they actually reliably can get parts. So it has a ripple effect right through your marketing department, your sales department, your customer service department. Everyone's being affected regardless of who they are. And you might think I'm exaggerating here, but we know about the global chip shortage is now starting to shut down auto parts and auto plants right across North America. If you've got a kid, and your kid keeps growing, they probably can't get a bike because there's a shortage of bike components. You can't get Shimano components from Taiwan because the factory is under such demand and everybody wants to ride a bike now for public spacing. And then there's bizarre things that you just don't expect, like the tomato harvest is going to be hit because there's no cans in Italy. So if you think about trying to take plum tomatoes, there's about a window of 48 hours where after harvest where they can sit before they start to disintegrate and you can't use them anymore. That window, poof, right? So now we're looking at a shortage of cans, which then hits the global market for pasta sauce. So nobody really expected the global market for pasta sauce to be hit by this, but it has.
Yeah, and personally, with a growing child, I feel your bike example very acutely and very personally, because I now have a 12-year-old with no bike. And I have to say, I was so excited to start off the conversation. I neglected to mention to everyone that please, we're going to go through the presentation, but please feel free to add in questions into the chat field. And at the end of the conversation, we're absolutely going to go through a lot of the questions or all the questions that you've got. But Nigel, just back to you. You've done a great job of talking about the global impact of what's been happening with supply chain. Can you talk a little bit more about specifically how this is affecting Canada?
Sure. One of the things that's interesting to me is that, we talk about the bullwhip effect. If you're in logistics or supply chain, you're well aware of the bullwhip effect. And some parts were predictable, right? Air traffic in Canada, it couldn't have had a worse 2020. At one point, Air Canada was down 94% in terms of the number of flights that they were doing, both from Canada to other places and domestically. And you might think, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't travel, but what does that mean to me? It means a ton. Most business travelers and most travelers for recreation aren't aware that the belly of the plane isn't just their own luggage. It's actually carrying lots of high value goods that need to be there today. So when the Air Canada or WestJet flight takes off, it's carrying electronics, it's carrying pharmaceuticals, it's bringing components within the manufacturing and the logistics systems to their next buyer. And that could be B2B, it could be B2C. But when you lose 94% of those flights, well, that shatters the system, because if it's high value, they have the money and the margin to be able to move to other distribution channels. And if they move to other distribution channels, somebody gets left out and doesn't get their stuff on a truck or a train. And then where does that go? It waits. And when it waits, well, where does it wait? That's a really critical problem in logistics. So here's some interesting data. Canada, right across North America, Canadian cities, warehouse space has never been in such demand. So if you think about what the vacancy rates are in the GTA for warehouse or distribution space, if you think about Calgary, Montreal, you're paying an absolute premium if you need to expand and rent new warehouse space. And you won't be able to do that because the biggest players, the ones with the most cash, they're the ones who will get the best space. You're going to outbid Amazon? I really don't think so, right? So when Amazon builds a new, warehouse the size of an aircraft terminal, that pushes everybody else down the line, down the queue. You can't outbid Loblaws. You can't outbid Canadian Tire. So as you think through what's going to happen for this warehouse and distribution center problem, that you can't get your stuff, so you need to keep your stuff, but you have nowhere to put your stuff. Well, it means you need to get your shipments in motion, and you need to be able to think through, where is my stuff, right? Which is a pretty crucial problem. And I'll keep it in motion. But the problem with that is, even if you wanted to keep it in motion, Canadian infrastructure is terrible. The Canadian Society of Engineers has estimated that we're literally hundreds of billions of dollars behind on our state of good repair. And the state of good repair is things like, will the bridge fall down? And if you have ever been through Montreal, you're aware that that's not actually an academic question. Chunks of the bridge do fall down on a regular basis. If you've driven underneath the Gardiner on Lakeshore, you're aware that yes, parts of the Gardiner falls down on Lakeshore on a not irregular basis. And so what happens? Right, so this is a picture of Highway 40 out of Montreal on the West End. It's one of the major routes to get to Montreal and to Ottawa and to Toronto. Well, the bridge needs emergency repairs, so it's closed for weeks. What happens to all the trucks in this picture that are supposed to be getting there on a just-in-time basis? They can't get there. And this is spring with the schools closed. What happens to traffic in September when kids go back to school, not virtually, but like actual schools, like ones with bricks and windows and stuff, and we go back to the office? How badly does that actually affect everybody? So my concern as an industry analyst who looks at sort of the big picture is that what we're starting to see is deliveries are getting further and further behind. You can see the black line there, right? The deliveries are broken. So what you do is you're like, oh, we'll keep the inventories, but you saw the warehouse problem. So then what happens is prices everywhere go up because somebody has to pay. And right now we're all paying for all the problems of the past. So is the situation good on logistics? No, it needs fixes. It needs a digital way of thinking about it that can help ameliorate all these other systemic problems. We can't build a bridge fast enough to fix it for you this summer, but you might be able to find another way around the problem.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Nigel. And Edwin, where does Romy fit into this landscape?
Well, Romy, by design, at its heart, is basically a data company, a data science company. We use sensors to gather data on things in motion, things in the field, assets, goods in transit, all over the supply chain. And we provide a real-time logistics visibility solution. That solution has a number of parts. It's not just the sensors. It's not just real time. Real time is one aspect of it, in that our devices travel with the goods that are in motion. So you have information as to what's occurring. As Nigel says, where's my stuff? Not only where's my stuff, what's the condition of my stuff? Do I have a problem that I might be able to respond to? Can I respond to it now? And so on. But Romy offers that real-time visibility. We offer end-to-end service in terms of be it indoor, be it in transit, be it outdoor, wherever it happens to be. Additionally, it's a full stack solution. We're not just offering the devices that sense what's going on in transit. We provide the platform that gathers all of that data. We provide the communication that delivers that sensed data from the device to the platform. We provide integration to back office systems, be it Oracle, SAP, whatever. We provide analytics. We provide a watchtower service so that we can help our customers monitor their goods in transit. When Nigel talked about the Evergreen, we had customers who were blocked, coming from the top, coming from the bottom, that couldn't get in the channel. I knew who they were. We all had visibility. One was a frozen food company shipping meat from New Zealand to Belgium. And fortunately, they eventually got through and all of the product was fine, but they were able to monitor at a package level every piece of that shipment in transit. So they knew they were okay in the refrigerated container. But it's that end-to-end full stack visibility that we provide. Additionally, our services are on demand. No one has to invest in large CapEx to get started with Romy. You can start from an OpEx model and scale. You can start with the most problematic aspects of what's concerning you. Maybe it's a particular lane. Maybe it's a particular product. Whatever. And do that, get visibility on that, then migrate to a larger portion of what you need to assess. Our services are global. So regardless to where you move on the globe, we have visibility from all of those points. Additionally, it's scalable. You can start small and scale to millions of shipments being monitored or assets being monitored. And finally, and I think Nigel alluded to this as well, it's open. You don't do this in a vacuum. This has to integrate with everything else you're doing, all of the systems of records you have, all of the other devices and other streams of data that are important to you. It all has to come together and be viewed as a total service. We do it in that manner.
And so how does it work when you have multiple suppliers and you lose chain of visibility, and how does a comprehensive solution really help you with that end-to-end visibility?
Well, if you think back in time, the way people got visibility of where's my stuff was through EDI. Someone entered electronically data and exchanged that data with shippers to let them know you've reached this milestone, this has occurred, or that has occurred. That was the way. And you got certain things. You got information on milestones, points in time where gates were crossed, if you would, and information was shared. But what you didn't have was information of what's happening all between all of those. Right? Then we moved to Romy and people like Romy offering level 2 or IoT sensor enabled visibility, where you put a device with the shipment that can tell you in near real time what's going on along the way. What's the temperature? What's the humidity? What's the shock, the tilt, all of those kinds of things. So that improved things greatly. But that alone by itself leaves out some of those milestones that people had grown accustomed to. Then comes level 3 capability, and that is where Romy is today. We're delivering both. We're delivering sensor-enabled visibility that is the whole top row, and we're delivering curated data visibility from milestones like shipment milestones from transporters, be they airlines or third-party logistics providers or transporters. And we grab data from vessel fees, from flight information, so we know about ETA and so on. And in doing that, we're providing a holistic service now. This is complicated business with many people touching your goods from A to B and not all sharing the same technology or process. How do you know where things are? You need to assemble lots of feeds of information in order to deliver that. And that's what we do.
Amazing. Nigel, what are your thoughts on this? How has COVID impacted the traditional supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the exciting picture type trends of like how bad it is for ports and the number of ships and the Suez Canal and all that. And that's like really visible stuff. This data was actually, it was interesting. It was from late last sort of Q3, Q4 of last summer from around North America. We're talking to supply chain experts, and some have prepared. Like Toyota did a very good job of preparing, and others didn't. You can see the data in the chart there, right? Well over half had either already had a significant supply chain problem or were fully expecting to have a supply chain problem. But that's kind of obvious. I mean, I pointed that out, and just from reading the papers, you can see that's coming to you. The critical thing is, what are you going to do about it, right? Like, what actions can you, in your role at the company or your organization or your partners or your ecosystem that you play in, what are you going to do about it? The first thing that people usually do is that they pick up the phone or these days, I guess, not pick up the phone, they use Google search engines instead, but they look for another supplier, right? How can we diversify our sourcing, mitigate risk through having a network of backup plans for the parts or the components? And depending how specialized the things are that you make, that your products are, or that you sell, you might be able to find a backup plan. But the really important thing is that second bullet that I flagged there. How do you improve your supply chain visibility? You can't make good decisions if you have no data. You're just guessing. You're like playing a pinata type game there. And whack-a-mole. If you notice, the person who knocks down the pinata never gets all the candy. It's all the other kids get it, and that's the problem with that, the visibility. So why don't people fix it? That's an equally interesting question, right? If you can take the steps to make things better, making better decisions faster because you have accurate real-time data, why wouldn't you do it? Seems obvious. But the thing is, you can't get there yourself. You're going to need to work with experienced partners who have done this before. This isn't a problem where you have a brand new startup show up because they've got a great algorithm. You need to have people who understand everything from the physical environment that your products are going to sit in. The Internet of Things is very complicated. It's got everything from endpoint devices that need power and need protection. It's got networks. What networks are you going to be working on? What networks do you need to be on? Is LPWAN enough, or are you thinking about whether you need to be even potentially able to hit satellite networks? Data management, applications, being able to integrate into ERP, supply chain, CRM. Your customer service team probably wants to be able to tell their clients what happens when there's a complaint. And then there's, end-to-end security. So you can't roll your own. And you don't have the skill set anyway to roll your own, even if you wanted to. So even partners and experts, they need to partner, they need to form alliances. And the thing is, when you start pondering this, your nodes within your supply chain were vulnerable to the pandemic. The common thread, though, is that you needed to have visibility and you didn't. You needed agility, the ability to do things about it after the fact. So if you can't see the problem, you can't act on it. And visibility into the supply chain and then the ability to act on it, that's what forms resilience. Right? Like that is what IDC would define as supply chain resilience, is the ability not just to see things, whether it's your suppliers, your inventory, your business processes, your customers, but the ability to respond. And what do I mean by respond? Adjust your inventory, repurpose your inventory, maybe evaluate which one of your clients needs to get it because they're the most important to you at that time. Adjust your manufacturing capability, activate alternative suppliers. Those are all things you need to do in order to be resilient. And when I think about that, well, how are you going to do that? Right? You need to orchestrate. Your role then in logistics and supply chain isn't necessarily to get in the mud, so to speak. It's actually to have a view above it and to tell other people in this network what to do. And we think of that as basically like an aircraft, air control tower. So when you start thinking about an air control tower and how they work, it's a good metaphor for what your role needs to be. You need to know where your stuff is, much like they need to know where the planes are. It encompasses sourcing, suppliers, supply chain planning, inventory, fulfillment, right? So it's not just with one monolithic entity. You're going to have a tower for a variety of specific purposes that are best of breed, that are good at what they do specifically. And is it visibility? Is it analytics? Is it decision making? It's all three of those. If it's not, then it's not going to do that see, decide, act functionality that we think is crucial for resiliency. So you need to be able to see what's happening in your supply chain, see what's happening in the broader business, understand and analyze what is your next best action and what will be your next best action in the future, and then take an actual action on it. If you can't act on it, what was the point of all that work and data that you just put into it? And that can only happen if your assets are connected and sending the data to the modern control tower. Otherwise, you're just, You're flying blind, so to speak. So what's next for these control towers? It's actually moving outside of one single siloed organization and thinking about the multi-enterprise supply chain network, the greater ecosystem that you play in, whether it's auto parts or whether it's pharmaceuticals or retailer or so on. If you can't bring that benefit to that big supply chain orchestration, then you're going to be left out by the biggest players in the networks.
And so what are some of the business outcomes that companies are really striving for?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. So one way I like to think about this isn't necessarily the problems that a logistics manager or the VP of supply chain is thinking about. Go above them. Like think about what does your business care about? And so we surveyed right across Canada all these C-level executives, CXOs, like the CEO, the COO, the CFO. And when we looked at what their priorities were, I looked at their priorities and was like, okay, these red check marks, they're the ones that having remote asset management and monitoring will actually help you achieve. So the business priority, cost reduction, makes sense because you can optimize your assets. Asset utilization, that's exactly what they're for. Business resilience and risk mitigation. How can you mitigate risk if you don't know where any of your things are and what's going to happen to them? Same thing goes for the ability to optimize your workflows. Again, if you don't know where your stuff is, it's very hard to increase your productivity because it lets you make better decisions, right? So what's going to drive adoption of asset management? There's a business priorities there, but really it's the ability to optimize your corporate margins, right? Not just your department margins, but the margins for sectors that depend on you. And that's through better efficiency. It's through timeliness, right? The window to dock, to unload and load at places from Walmart all the way through to the auto parts sector, you have a very tight window. And if you can't get there on time, you're paying penalties or you're waiting, which throws off everything else. Theft, shrinkage. And then there's things like customer experience and branding. And I realize people in supply chain don't always think about the branding side of the house, but if you have out of stocks, that causes a huge problem for your marketing team because research has shown that people who are faced with out of stocks, what they typically do is not just don't buy, they stop coming back to that retailer. They'll start getting a loyalty to a different retailer. So it changes the lifetime value of that customer, and that's a real problem for your marketing team. And then spoilage, same sort of problem. So, yes, there are definitely business reasons, not just tech reasons, why you buy remote asset management.
Well, you've convinced me, Nigel. I mean, it'd be great to hear some of the real life examples, of businesses that have benefited from implementing a visibility solution.
Sure. Let me start with looking at the different industries that we've had some experience with. Think of food and beverage. Nigel talked about that. Obviously, that's critical. It exists everywhere. There's chemical and solvents. There the third-party logistics providers, people that carry all of these goods who want to provide visibility as to where your shipment is. There's the automotive sector, obviously, and we know what they're going through right now with the shortage of chips and the like. Industrial equipment players and heavy electronics, that's an area on which we focus as well. Clearly, pharmaceutical and life sciences is a major area, and I'll speak to some of these. Consumer goods, for sure, electronics, high-tech electronics, for example, computers, phones, all of these we're tracking today for various customers. And packaging and containers. I'll share an example of that. But when you think of packaging and containers, everybody who manufactures, be they chemical, be they automotive, consumer goods, pharma, all use packaging to some extent. And that single area, the makers of the packaging, is one way to address it. It's also being addressed by each of these other industries. As we go into those industries and work with those customers, they have packaging issues that we're addressing. Crates, bins, totes, racks, things that carry product from the production line. Do I have too many? Do I have too few? Are they in the right place at the right time? Am I spending too much money? Am I inefficient because I don't know where things are? And so forth. But let me share some examples. I'll use some names here. Understand with 300 plus customers, we've got lots of people in each of these categories, but I'll just share a couple. Here we go. One challenge that we face across the board is the inefficient utilization of returnable assets. And the question becomes, as I was saying earlier, do I have what I need, where I need, when I need? And what impact is that having? This particular customer had a question of, can I ensure that I'm getting the right ingredients at the right time to facilitate manufacturing? Bear with me one second. I got. Okay, cool. They wanted to get ingredients in to ensure timely manufacturing at their facilities. And that lack of visibility of cargo that was discussed earlier was impacting them. By implementing Romy, they have ensured that they can do that. This is not also true of Coke, it's true of several other players that we work with. And this is a common issue with most customers. Where is my stuff? Is it coming in on time? If I'm shipping it, is it arriving on time to my customers? What's the ETA? So now we talk about a challenge of inefficient utilization in the velocity of returnables. People who have these containers that carry product, be it chemical companies, be it food and beverage companies, and the like, have a challenge of cycle visibility. Where is the container? Have I lost the container? The example I'll share with you here is a customer who was experiencing loss, millions of dollars of loss. As a result of implementing Romy, they were able to disrupt several syndicate criminal organizations. We've got pictures of arrests being made and recovery of assets. They move containers that carry fresh produce from grocers to processing centers, growers rather, to processing centers, to various stores like Walmart and IBE and others, HIB. So this particular customer was able to recover assets, prevent further loss of assets, and it was simply through visibility of seeing their assets going to a zone or an area they shouldn't be going to, and it was visible on the platform. So they were able to take action on it. This is expanding now, and they're doing the same thing in Europe and moving forward. Another challenge is spoilage or damage of goods. This could be computers and shock and tilt kinds of things where things get dropped and broken. It could be in food and beverage where things are spoiling, frozen goods, refrigerated goods, fresh produce, and so on. The example I'll share with you here is one I'm sure everybody can relate to, and that is Mondelez. Mondelez is chocolates. Nobody wants melted chocolates. They had difficulty tracking why are they having temperature excursions on their shipments. Things were sitting on tarmacs. Well, if they know it's sitting on a tarmac and they can move it to a refrigerated area in real time, have that visibility, they can prevent losses. So this was Mondelez's challenge. Another one you might recognize is Danone. Danone ships fresh yogurt and dairy products. And the issue with them is that they use hundreds of transporters of their goods. They use third-party logistics to move their goods. They have different facilities, different means of moving those goods. Some are moved by van, some are moved by small truck, large truck, and so on. They can't control what technology is on those trucks to monitor their goods. So they put Romy devices on every shipment, and they have a consistent, consolidated view of what's going on with each shipment and temperature monitoring throughout. They do tens of thousands of shipments annually, and very, very good customer. I'll share one more. We know about loss from theft. In Canada, I've read articles about trucks that have been hijacked and goods that have been stolen. This is a big problem, not only in Canada, but across North America, around the world. We've got customers that put a lock on their transit, such that that lock can only be opened by an authorized person with the swipe of a card or through the platform that we provide, so that it's opened at border crossings, which is appropriate, relocked, and it's not opened again through transit, and they can monitor that that container stayed locked throughout transit, preserving the goods. If it deviates from a route, they are notified. If the lock gets cut, they are notified. They can authorize authorities to move in. But this is a real opportunity for many. One company using that lock used it for a slightly different purpose. It wasn't so much the loss from theft, but the loss of time. They moved cargo from one terminal to another terminal in Dubai. This is DHL. And if they could prove that container of goods that came off that particular last flight and are moving to another flight to exit had not been open, they can avoid a long list of procedures and a lot of time. So they put the lock in place to ensure that this container has been checked by security. It hasn't been opened since being checked by security. Good to go, and they bypassed a lot of red tape in their logistics process. So those are just a few examples, but there are many. There are many. We're delighted to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, super interesting. I always thought that asset management was super interesting, but now you've brought the truly critical nature of it, and I want to hear more sometime about the crime syndicate ring that was broken. That should be a great story. But Nigel, I guess from my perspective, I'd really love to know, what are your recommendations for our listeners on how to select the right partner to work with?
Sure. So, I mean, first off, you've got to convince those who can make the decisions, your CFO, your COO, your CEO, that you're going to actually go ahead with it, right? So think about the business case in total. And the business case isn't the cost necessarily of taking a system like Romy and deploying it. The cost of not doing it as well matters, right? So if you're struggling to retain or keep clients because of operational issues like the ones Edwin had mentioned, that matters. Like those are business pain points, having spoilage and theft interrupt you. So bring that up as part of your business case for trying to get approval and get funding for these types of solutions. The other thing is decisions aren't made in a vacuum, right? Whether it's a technologically best solution or the financially cheapest solution, either one of those is sort of illusory, right? Because you could go down one road because of either end, whether it's business case or whether it's because of the technical case, and realize it's not actually what your company needs. So think through the categories closely, right? The endpoint sensor. What do you specifically need? What are your power demands? What environments are going to be running in? What battery life do you need? What data do you need? As Edwin mentioned, like potentially what you need is cold chain. Potentially what you need is accelerometers to measure whether there's tilt, yaw, drop, impact forces, stuff like that for something like a semiconductor or so. Or it's something simpler, right? So do you need to buy the absolute highest end or down? That matters for the endpoint sensor. But the endpoint sensor is just one part of the system. So if you focus too much on that, you're going to go in the wrong direction. Think about an area that really drives some costs up, which is how do you integrate this into the systems of record that your other business departments need? ERP, SCM, even your accounts receivable, accounts payable, your customer experience and your customer service department, they matter as well. Is this going to require a forced march with lots of consultants, or is there some way to do this through an API-based system or something efficient like that? Does it stand up on its own as an alternate option? And then these days, especially, I can't stress this enough, security is now a board level problem. It used to be the problem for the IT department and occasionally the OT problem, but mostly the IT department. Now it's a board level problem. It's above the COO. They do not like seeing themselves on the front page of the Globe and Mail. They do not like seeing ransomware has hit my company on CTV News. And the thing is, as we start connecting more operational issues like logistics to the intranet, well, you've got to think about security issues as well. So consider how your proposed suppliers are going to work with that, not necessarily on the endpoint device, but also in terms of the data, the device, the network, data management systems as well. And then future-proof yourself. It might be the best system today, but think back just 5 years ago, how different devices and networks were 5 years ago today. So think about how will upgrades work, how will even patches and repairs work. Is it cloud-based? Does it require changes to local environments, on-premise environments, and such? And then think about the cost of scale. You might start off with a small pilot. Does it work at scale, right? And scale might be your scale, or it might be clients of yours like Walmart's or GM's. That's a different kind of scale. So that's one of the technical side. And then on the financial side, obviously I've put some here, but one thing to really think about is procurement departments love grinding out the hard costs, the ones on the paper. That's often short-sighted because training matters, right? If you need every single person to take off time from work to stare at how to do the new process, that doesn't show up in the contract, but it eats your dollars of your company. Likewise, customer experience. If your customers hate working with it and your partners hate working with it because it's a pain to work with, that matters as well in terms of how it plays out. So try and take a holistic view of this, not just try and grind it out through procurement and the best technical specs, but take the broad view, broad strokes. There's a lot there to think about.
Edwin, anything that you'd like to add?
I'd like to just echo everything Nigel just said because it's so right on. We see this constantly in deployments. The beauty is that you don't have to try to eat the elephant all at once. You need to know that you can eat it, and you need to have a plan for doing so. But you can start small, you can scale. Not an issue. The critical thing here is this is more of a business decision than it is a technology decision. There's a lot of technology that can come to bear on this. In our case, we're a cloud-based platform, so there's nothing to install per se. There's no infrastructure that needs to be added. The devices come ready to use, ready to run. You put it on a shipment, you put it on a device, on an asset, and you start monitoring. But that planning that Nigel talked about is critical. Where do I go from here? How do I start? How do I scale? And how do I integrate with the rest of my environment? You don't have to wait until full integration to start seeing real value. You can start seeing real value early. And we take that stepwise approach. It's a journey with us, and we take our clients through that journey. I think the key is working with someone with technology that's been proven, that's ready to go, and that's ready for tomorrow. That's Romy.
Fantastic, thank you. Now we're going to move to some questions. So for any viewers out there, please use the Q&A widget to send in some questions. We've got a couple of minutes and we're happy to go through any of the submitted questions. I do have two that have been submitted so far. So I'll start with the first one, which is, and I think, Edwin, this is probably for you, which is, how complicated is it to deploy an asset management solution? You know, about how long does it take, and is there any downtime?
Good question. It varies, is the honest answer. But with proper planning, it doesn't have to be long. I mean, you can install something and start seeing some value within the first month. In some cases, we have done installations in a week to 10 days, and it's been full. Imagine, for example, you've got 500 assets. You're a small company. You have 300 to 500 assets that you want to monitor, and you want to monitor them in 2 facilities. You can put devices on each of those 300 to 500 assets. You can get that done in a day or two, and you can put a device that will read all of those in each of the 2 facilities. And at the end of a few days, plus some training, just say at the end of a week, you could be monitoring 500 assets throughout that facility. Then you think about shipment monitoring, where things are moving all around the globe. Your first shipments, you just want to be across Canada. Then you want to do some shipments that are going international. That will scale. You'll do some shipments for a month. You'll do more for another month. Maybe it takes you 3 to 4 months to scale this into something. And you're simply looking at the business application at this point. You're identifying what information do I need to push to other systems, what information I need to pull from other systems, but that integration hasn't happened yet. Bring in IT later after you've demonstrated value, but start realizing value and then scale. It's a journey, and it doesn't have to take a very long time, but it doesn't end just because you've done X. You then want to do Y. You then want, and these use cases get added. We call it landing and spreading, if you would. So we focus on what the critical objective was at the beginning, and then start looking at all of the additional things you can do because of what you've done here. And our customers start in 1 year, and 3-4 years later, they're still doing more and more things. So we like that.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic approach. I really appreciate the, trying and proving the value and then expanding out into other opportunities. I think that's fantastic. Another question that's coming in now is the Romy solution 5G ready?
Well, it's 5G ready. I wouldn't say the devices are 5G. The devices are 4G. 5G is just coming on stream. The devices will evolve. But our devices, you don't have 2G operational in Canada anymore, but we have devices that are 4G LTE CADM, and the fallback is 2G. And keep in mind, our devices work around the globe. Some markets don't have 4G yet. They're still at 3G and 2G. But yes, we follow the spectrum from the telcos, and we'll support it all. Question is, at what time?
Yeah, fantastic. An interesting question from one of our viewers is, when you use the Romy hardware, how do you actually get it back to your warehouse? And
That's a good question. We have two. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was going to try and provide a little bit more context, but I think you've got it.
Yes. There are two deployment models that Romy uses. One is called self-service, where you have in your inventory X number of devices and you move them around and you use them as appropriate and you get them back. And we can provide help in planning the process by which that's done. You can send the device out in a envelope, if you would, or in a packaging that is self-addressed where it comes back to you either through Canada Post or through other means. That's one way that self-service model works. The other model is something we call the managed service model for shipment monitoring, where you tell us the origin points of your shipment and how many devices you need in order to conduct that shipment visibility on a monthly basis. And we set up a schedule and we deliver devices to those origin points at the schedule that you've indicated, X number per week, X number per month, whatnot, and you do your shipments, and we take full responsibility of recovering the device at the destination and just simply supplying you with devices for your shipment origins. So either model can work. We have customers doing both, self-service and managed service.
Perfect. I'll just give it a second for any additional questions. And if not, I guess I'll just hand it over. Nigel, Edwin, anything that you want to wrap up with? Any final statements?
Yeah, just one quick thought. I think a lot of people are extremely excited and thinking that as COVID winds down with vaccinations, that all of a sudden this interruption to their business is going to be over. But the benefits of asset management aren't tied to COVID necessarily and the COVID disruption. Volatility in the international system of trade relations is here for real, regardless of how COVID goes over the next, say, 12 months or so. You've already seen disruption between Brexit and the EU. There's the US and China starting the beginnings of a trade war. There's the thickening of the border between Canada and the US. So this volatility in terms of how you're going to get your assets around is not necessarily going to improve to sort of some mythical past golden years. And the more you can take advantage of digital solutions to help enable you to do it better, it lets you take a competitive advantage over your peers in your industry and in your sector.
Awesome. Thank you, Nigel. And Edwin?
I completely agree. The thing that I would highlight for people considering this is don't worry about the technology. The technology to do what you need done in terms of providing visibility of assets or goods in transit exists. It constantly will evolve and change. The approach at Romy is don't get wrapped up in the devices, get wrapped up in the visibility. That's the platform, that's the integration, that's the business that you're in. You're not in a technology or a device business. We'll provide whatever devices are necessary. We'll work through this. We'll walk together. We'll run together. We'll deliver together. But the key is start with something that's manageable, that you can look at and say, if I could solve this, that would be a good first step. And let's plan that step. Let's do that first thing. Then let's do that second and third and so on. And we'll march down this journey together. But all of everything that has been discussed here, though fully integrated and complicated as it may be, it's not that difficult for you to embrace and to get value from. And I would encourage you to consider it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Edwin. Nigel, I really appreciate both of your time. It's been a fantastic session, some great information. And for any of the viewers out there that would like to learn more about asset management solutions, you can visit rogers.com/asset. Thank you very much and have a great day.